Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And today's guest is Peter Donegan from Peter Donegan Garden Design. So he's a three-time guest on the podcast. One, he was technically the host, but I just wanted to get him on to have a chat to him and see what he's been up to since our last chat, where he was the guest, because we didn't talk much about what he'd been up to when he was the host, and just find out what his life has been like since his gold medal winning flower and garden show build in Melbourne. And he's also coming out here at the end of October, so the 25th of October, I think he's arriving in Cairns, talking at the Australian Institute of Horticulture Awards night. And then he's also coming out to Melbourne for a couple of talks as well, talking about the benefits of garden shows to the landscaping industry, as well as what it's like designing gardens for TV. And he's also doing a talk with Martin Semken as well. So that'll be pretty value-packed few chats that he's got. And if you're wanting to listen to any of them, you can go to the Australian Institute of Horticulture website and you can get tickets there. And I might end up going there myself. So I do enjoy chatting to him. In this chat, he's got some great advice for people who are looking to do their first garden show build. So for that select few, it's definitely worth having to listen to. And if you like listening to wise people talk about the landscaping industry, also worth listening to. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Peter Donegan. Peter, thank you very much for joining us again on the Landscaping Podcast. Just wanting to, there's no point asking again how you started the industry, because we know that from the last episode. But I was just keen to catch up with you to see what the MIFGS experience was like, and then what you've been up to since then.
Oh, wow. MIFGS, well, first of all, thanks for having me back on, Joe.
Again, it's the first one back since you were the host.
I only lasted for one episode, which will tell you how good I was. You gave me the boot after that and renamed yourself as main host of the Landscaping Podcast. But yeah, no, MIFGS was, it's funny, Joel, when you go to I'm sorry, my sentences are a little bit caught here, but I think on one hand, you know you're going to a showgrounds, very beautiful showgrounds, I should add, to make a show garden on a very large stage. And you've got to work hard first, but at the same token, I think when things become a little bit more complex is when, as we previously discussed, when the contractor thinks he's the designer and the designer thinks he's the contractor, and they're all sort of cross over, or the organizers behind the scenes maybe don't deliver what they say they're going to deliver, or the water doesn't work, for example, something as simple as that. But when you get to Carlton Gardens and you realize, Trent and Marcus and all of the people behind the scenes, there's too many names in there, I don't leave anybody out, and apologies. But when you realize that they're just a perfect symphony on that part, then you're working with a team like Semken Landscaping, who have the resources to back up what you need to make a garden become real. You start to realize that it's actually, it's not the designer on his own, inverted commas, who invariably takes all of the glory. And I think when you look at the photographs of me in the middle of the build or after the garden, and no photograph published on my own at any time, I'm beside Dean Cartwright and beside Martin Semken, invariably holding an award in the middle of the garden. And I think that's testament. I wouldn't have had it any other way, but it's testament to what Semken gave. But again, I'll say it, without IMG, without everybody behind the scenes, everybody involved in that garden, and my God Almighty, it's an endless list. I'd have to direct you to a website, or we'd be here for an entire podcast reading them out. It's just magnificent, and I loved absolutely every second of it because it was so easy. And again, I'll say it, you worked hard, and it appears like it was a daydream to the visitor who's paying the ticket in, as it should. But what a setting, what a location. And it's only when I think we've discussed this before off air, when you walk around to the Achievable Gardens and you see the standard that they're at, that's not by accident. Again, it's a sort of an ode to the organisers, but just all, like, again, what a show. What an absolute show. What a humbling privilege. What a setup. what a gig. And I know you had your own garden there, which is right behind your shoulders. And I don't have them. But yeah, and I think I was asked, would I go back to MIFGS again? And I think my answer was, I'd be a fool if I said anything other than I'd love to, which is the wrong thing to say. You're supposed to haggle and go, I don't know. And they go, well, we'll give you $10. And you go, and they go 15, and you go, 20, done. Okay, I'm in. But no, I'm a cheap date when it comes to it's bad reverse psychology, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, what a show! I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it, and I'm very, very grateful to everyone that I met there. I don't think there was any sort of issues. And again, I'll say you work bloody hard to make what's drawn on paper real, and it wasn't an easy garden to make real. I knew that, and Martin knew that. We'll talk about that a little bit further on, but at the same token, yeah, loved the place, loved Melbourne, and loved everybody there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think I've spoken to anyone or mentioned it in any episodes since, but I was blown away how awesome the IMG folks were. Like, they're just such a professional outfit, and they've got a team of experts in their role. So they've got heaps of different people involved, and they're all amazing at the thing they do. Like, I just felt really assured by them that everything was going to go as planned, and you could see things come up during the show, but then they get on top of it real quick. Like that was, yeah, because I'd worked with them before, but not as close as that. But so working closer with them, I was just blown away how impressive they were.
Look, I can't emphasize it enough when you see people panicking and they're the organizers. You've got serious issues, and it's a knock-on effect from the top down. As sure as you might have designers who are new to show gardens, who are student designers, who are first timers there, or doing the boutique sections. I just got that one out. Whether you're a one-man show or a three-man show, the pressure is sort of exponential. It's reciprocal on the scale of the garden down to the number of employees. But I can't emphasize it enough when you meet Marcus and Trent, and there's a plethora of ladies in there who are equally wonderful. And again, I'll say it, I'm not going to go through all their names, but none of them at any point in time were panicked. When the rain was coming down and the white dresses were covered in mud from the base up, and you'd meet them and you'd say, how are you? Grant. Peter, how's things? Good, yeah. How you getting on with the garden? The dress is a bit muddy, but don't mind that. That's the kind of thing you want to hear, really, but it has a knock-on effect. And I think when I go back to when we did our first show garden in 07, 08, I remember one of this gentleman, I don't know who he wasn't part of the organizing team, and he came up to me and said, you under pressure? I went, no. He went, you should be. You've only 3 days left. And all of a sudden, the little people in your head start to go, well, I'm not under pressure. And then the other half is going, well, maybe you should be. And you start to, we better speed it up. And once you start doing that, the equations that you had on paper go out the window, and you start to panic slightly. You start to walk a little bit faster. The people by your side start to pick up on that. And the knock-on effect, you don't stop for lunch, you don't have the extra cup of coffee, and the cogs start to slightly fall off, and you need a streamlined, organized, professional team, and you're spot on the money, Joel, from the top of IMG down to Semken to myself. I think I joked with you yesterday when we were chatting, saying that there's only one man calmer than me, and I'm speaking to him.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's just natural though. It's yeah, I don't know. Just it's not something I do deliberately. It's just the way I am. So I'm thankful for it though.
Yeah, well, I think I was joking with you when we were shooting the breeze, if I may, and I was saying I think it was 3 days before show was due to open, and it was lashing out of the rain, and I went up and had a chat with you and said, "How are you getting on?" And you went, "Grand." I said, okay, but you've got 47,000 tiles still to put up. And you went, yeah, it'll be okay. And that was it. No problem. No problem at all. Just nice and cool. Nice and cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big talker either, which is weird that I have a podcast for that as well.
Yeah, that is weird, Joel. Yeah, you should have that as your new Instagram bio. But at the same token, look, you're a cool man, and you know your stuff. And to all serious matters, again, I'll say it. You when you design a garden or draw a garden or doodle a garden, you've a rough idea as you're doodling it, the time scales that it's going to take for every line of a pen that you make on paper, and you know what's going to happen. And when you've got that, sometimes, and we used to always joke when we were building the gardens that we had designed, that it would take 19 days to do all the groundworks and the paving, and the place still looks like it's topsy-turvy. In 3 days the planting goes in, and all of a sudden you're a genius again. But the client is panicking behind the scenes, and your job is to reassure people, whether it's a show garden or whether it's in real life. Your job is to reassure people that I know my stuff, I've drawn it in my head, I've built this for all of my life, and it will come in on time. And am I under pressure? Never. Do I get it wrong? Never. Have I ever got it wrong? No. And will I? No, because you know what you're doing, and that's why you're paid the big bucks, Joe.
Yeah, I must have got things wrong then, because I didn't get the big bucks.
Well, you should thank your sponsor a little bit more often, and maybe get a new host to your podcast.
You mentioned that you'd be keen to do MIFGS again. Does that mean you come back next year?
Pleads the Fifth Amendment. That would be an ecumenical matter, to use a Father Ted quote. Let's see what happens with next year, but I'll eloquently say it. If an offer came in to go back to MIFGS, I'd be a fool to say no. But let's see what happens, and let's see what the lads behind the scenes come up with.
Are you calling me a fool then? So I definitely said no.
Negative. No, I certainly am not. That's even worse reverse psychology. This sounds like I'm in an argument with one of my four sisters for no apparent reason. But yeah, no. Let's see. I don't know. Show gardening, I think, it's a funny game, and it's a really funny industry. And myself and Martin were chatting about it, and it's the question that keeps on coming up again, the sort of the why did you do X type of show garden on one hand, or why did you do a show garden in the first place? And I think you'll be in agreement with me on this one, that when you go and do a show garden, the clever thing for, say, me and you to do if we're in business together is to put in a large patio, sort of a roof or terraced area, some nice planting and a bit of lawn, and person A walks by and says, how much does one of these cost? 10 by 10 space, say. And we turn around and go, look, you're $90,000. Where you live in Ballarat? Okay, you're $100,000. Okay, fine. And we know it's between that and that cost, and you sell 10 or 20 of them. And I think in my case, when you do a not replicatable work garden, which is a 200 square meter, 20 by 10, 45,000 liters of water, ridiculous weights on a suspended timber structure, 75 ton in total, and 8.5 meter tall trees. As I said to Martin, and we're saying it to each other, he's saying, you could have made life easier for me. And I'm saying to him, well, you could have said, no, I don't want to build your garden. Touche, if I may. But we were both saying, but then the question comes to the both of us, why would you do this? And I'm smiling, and Martin and I are both saying, you'll never see the likes of it again at MIFGS, because it's so difficult a build. Why would you want to put yourself through the pain barrier? And it's a real testament, again, I'll say it, to the suppliers list, on that. And if you go to the Semken website or Google Donegan Garden Design or something and find that show card and find the list of sponsors, and you start to see it, and but people just didn't say no. And now I'm querying why the suppliers didn't turn around and go, what, are you off your face? We've been involved in MIFGS for the last 25 years, and from Warner's to Bamstone, it's a head scratching thing. But there was one lady, and I think this sums it up for me, Joe. There was one lady in particular who came down to the garden, and she's in the profession, and she was smiling as she came to the garden because she'd read the story which came out of Peter's daydreamed head. And her smile was like a morning sunshine in a television advert where you wake up in some fancy 5-star hotel, you know, one of them, and the lady's got the white towel on and she's bringing you a cup of coffee in bed, which is really now a daydream. And before she walked into the garden, I told her the story of what it was behind the scenes. And she walked through the garden and came back with tears in her eyes. And I was saying to Martin afterwards, you know, there's few and far between gardens I've done in my lifetime where somebody walks in smiling and walks out with tears. And again, I'm only but one part of the chink, because IMG could have said no, Semken could have said no, Bamstone could have said no, Warner's could have said no. The list literally goes on and on and on, and you realize you've actually got about 150 people holding hands who just want to make this daydream a reality for no financial, let me rephrase that, no direct financial immediate gain.
Yep.
Because you're not selling a replicatable garden. And in that context, my accountant will tell you that I am the greatest moron he ever met. And then my note to Martin was, or his note to me was, look, you know something good will come of it? And I said, yeah, but you just don't know when. And he went, yeah. And I said, but that's not considered legal tender. Martin, you can't pay a mortgage with, you know, it's going to
just trust me.
Maybe down the line. Yeah. So look, I'll say it to any of the sort of the first timers who are listening out there, like, get clever, make a few quid. It's all right to have a beautiful garden that's easily replicated, but there's a join between the two where it appears like a sort of a daydream, but it's a daydream that a homeowner wants. And if you're doing a first garden at MIFGS in the achievable section, that's what I'd be personally aiming for. Now, I say that, did I ever do that? No. I've never done that, but my trajectory in through the industry, as you're well aware, was completely different, or a bit of a freak to most people's. So, you know, unless mama's rich and daddy's good looking and he can become a Machiavellian-esque benefactor and fund those little people in your head, then stay away from the daydreams until you get to the point where you can become a little bit sort of Elvis on stage in the white suit.
Yeah, it depends what your depends what your goals are, though, because the garden I built was replicatable, and that's what the judges marked it down heavily on, because it was too achievable and, you know, normal. So if you're looking to win, you're better off doing the daydream style design that's original, not something that they've seen before. So,
well,
it depends on your goals.
I'll break that down into another sort of subsection for you. And it's a conversation I had a while ago with a guy called Andrew Wilson. Andrew Wilson, for those who aren't aware, would be one of the partners alongside Mark Gregory and Andrew Fisher-Tomlin with London College of Garden Design. You've got a Melbourne London College of Garden Design with Brent and another gentleman. And I was talking to Andrew Wilson about this, and I said, look, if I design a patch of grass and say it was inspired by Wimbledon lawn, 1 square meter of it only, and assuming it's accepted, and I put it into a show like MIFGS, the judges have to say, well, the brief says it's inspired by, it looks like it, smells like it, must be it gets gold. The difference is it doesn't get photographed, and therefore it doesn't appear in the media. because it's a boring, but the designer wins gold. So that's the first part. The second part then is if you do the daydream, where you turn around and say, I wrote this garden, or I wrote this poem translated into something photosynthetic because I wanted to show that I loved her. The judges are able to say, well, I don't feel that you showed that you loved her enough. Therefore, they mark you down a gold. The designer loses. It may be a beautiful daydream of a photograph, and therefore steals the media. But at the end of it all, there's a part in the middle where, in my case, I think without MIFGS and without Semken and without all of the sponsors, and I mean all of the sponsors involved, there's only one way to thank them, and that's to make a daydream which becomes as I would describe it, a half-page photograph on a newspaper top of a website, where you get what I'm saying. And in that context, that's the payback for them, because ultimately they've funded or made the garden real. And I think in that case, I did the right thing, but it was a very dangerous game if my non-self-centered, but if I aim for gold and I go self-centered, then I lean more towards the patch of grass. But if I want to thank my sponsors, which is the right thing to do, then I lean away from it. That the garden got gold is, I don't mean to be dismissive of it, but I knew it was on the cusp of silver to gold because you wrote a love story and try and explain that in a brief for which the judges can potentially disagree with. And now it becomes a bit like art. It becomes subjective. It's sort of, well, do you like it? Well, no, I don't. Well, the next guy does, because it's, it's, I don't know, Da Vinci, but Da Vinci-esque art to me is 2 steps away from a modern day selfie. It bores me to tears. I understand it, but that's really what it is. I like the stuff where you sort of get lost in it, like the scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You get sort of sucked into the picture. But again, I'll say it, that's how judging goes. The question is you're right, you've hit the nail on the head. Who are you building this garden for, or what is it that you want to achieve out of it? And if it's work, then fine, do that. If it's thank your sponsors, then fine, do that part, which means you make the photograph. And if it's designer wants gold, then you do something that is ultimately a patch of grass or leans towards a chessboard, and good luck, you're done. It's really simple once you understand it. But understanding judging rules, I do. Would I have argued, or would I have been able to argue if the judges gave me silver because they felt? It's not I didn't show. It's not that the plant was diseased or something like that. That was never to be in question, or the stonework was never going to be wrong. The construction of it was never going to be wrong. It can only be what I wrote and what I drew, because Semken does things to an absolute T. That it got gold makes me smile. But yeah, there you go. But again, achievable gardens and focus on that category is what I was referring to. That's very different to what you saw in the boutique gardens, which were again, I'll give huge credit to the organizers, to ING and team, and I said it to them afterwards. When you walked along and you saw, without naming names, one with a chandelier, one based on regeneration after fire, and one with sort of pebbles and succulent plants, if I may. None of them were in any way even remotely similar. And the standard of the trade show gardens, I think I spoke with one of them and I said, "How is this a show garden?" And they went, "No, this is a trade stand." And I went, "Why? Go and ask the organizers to change category or enter the category and get a medal for it." And I'm scratching my head. Like, it's at that level. It's probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and one of the most beautiful things I've ever been allowed to be a part of. And again, I'll say it, I'm really grateful.
Yeah, something I would like to see, which I saw at Floriade, which is like the Canberra garden show that I went to a couple of weeks ago. That in front of the display gardens that they had there, they had their brief. So when the designers submitted their brief, they had they could submit 300 words of a brief to the judges, and then 200 words, which was going to be in front of the garden for the public, so they could get an understanding behind the reason behind the design. So I reckon that would have been good for yours as well, and like for every garden, so that there can be a brief that the public can read, so they can understand more about the garden.
Yeah, well, look, I remember I'll go back and I remember we did a garden in 2008, I think it was, and standing out in the middle of the audience is what I used to do, and you'd hear people, you're talking 5-6 deep, you're talking 20,000-30,000 people in through the showgrounds, and one person on your right hand is saying, this guy's off his head, or I can't stand it, or I don't like it, and the other person is saying, I absolutely love it. And as horticulturally qualified and educated as I might be in the build of show gardens, or how show gardens are put together, or how easy it is to achieve goals by doing something completely boring as versus the risk, if metal is your choice, of going that way. I think when you get into the one that we did, I don't know how you explain an emotion to somebody who is emotionless, or somebody who's been through a breakup, when it went well or good or not, and their ability to disagree with it. And unless you turn around and you give the equation for photosynthesis, which nobody can disagree with, I guarantee you, if you went to in Ireland, we'd say, I guarantee if you went down to the local pub, you'd find somebody who would disagree with it. But you can't disagree with science. And equally, you can't disagree with a individual's emotion. But I think in this one, I think what was published online pretty much was, but I still say to this day, Joel, when we spoke previously about the biodiversity and climate change conference that I spoke at, and I showed the gardens that we designed that ticked all of those boxes, the first remit at the top of the page is, you can tick all of the biodiversity boxes you want, but if the garden looks shocking, you're dead in the water. And like a piece of art, if Da Vinci or whoever it was didn't paint it, like, I don't really, the question is, do I like it? I know he painted, should that influence? And so for the visitor, sometimes I think the understanding of the brief, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that's written down, but I like to look at things and go, Sex Pistols, I understand why some people might think it's a bit loud. Rolling Stones, I can understand why some people don't like that song or this song. You go to Hendrix, I get it. And then you get people who like Guest Club 7 and bad boy bands, and you're scratching your head going, what is wrong with the world? But you realize they've sold more albums than him over here, who's the hardest working artist in the world. And I think sometimes it's just nice to walk into a showground, stroll it, and if you're paying the $35 or the $50 or whatever it might be, and I'll give you the flip analogy of that. One of the nicest things I ever did, and I spent not a bit of time, but I'd go the long way around the site, but I'd always go into the main building to see what the floral artists were doing. I was so blown away by what they did inside. But albeit I have a horticultural education, it was nice to be able to stroll in and not have to see it from a garden build or garden design construction sense, if you get me. They were away from all of the elements. It was really, really, really wonderful. But the amount of work that they put in, it's like if you stood up on the balcony inside the building and you look down, it's like watching a million ants. And then you walk back out and walk back in the front door, and it's absolutely miraculous what they managed to piece together. That's really where I've got a soft spot for how they do that, how you envision something like that that's got a what do you call it, a perishable date far faster than something that's in a 3 litre or 5 litre pot. is just phenomenal. You know, it's absolutely baffling. And yeah, I just thought it was, look, it's brilliant. Yeah. But I was delighted to hear that you were judging at the Floriade.
Yeah, I've done some judging for landscape in Victoria. So I did it again this year, and that's the third year that I've done it. And I didn't know what to expect the first year, but I absolutely loved it. Just seeing the different way people do things, and yeah, it's fascinating seeing it. And especially this year, the category I was in was under $75,000. So they were just four completely different gardens. So it's just it's one of the best things to do. So I couldn't recommend enough people to do it. And then going to Floriade, because I'd never, like, Floriade's an awesome place to go to on its own, but then the fact that they had garden shows there, display gardens, sorry, was an added bonus. So yeah, that was just an awesome weekend.
There you go. Well done, you.
Thank you. And you're coming out here. What is it, in about a month? Coming out here to
talk. I'm coming on the 25th of October. I have it written down in front of me, but I'll pretend not to look at the notes I've written down, so I don't get it wrong.
Pretending to remember it.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember it. No, 25th of October, I arrive in Cairns. And so that's the Australian Institute of Horticulture. That's Alan and Andrew and Jason Summers, who's based in Melbourne. So they're the ones who've organised for me to come out and speak at their conference. And funnily enough, at the conference in Cairns on the 27th, my talk there, I'm keynote speaker, and which is a joke. I say it's a joke locally, but you call it tall poppy syndrome. Here, you know, even my dad, if I come into my dad and said, rest his soul, but if I come in and said, you know, I won a gold medal, he'd go, why are you always talking about yourself? You know, Jesus, you're not here about your brother. It was, you mightn't have spoken to him in 5 months. That could have been your first sentence since you were born. And it was still, that sort of cut the legs from underneath you or bring you down to earth.
Yeah.
But they have me as keynote speaker there, talking about the benefits of show gardens to the horticulture industry. And then I think I'm on stage speaking with Costas, the absolute rock star that he is, on their awards evening. So I'm looking forward to that. Never been to Cairns. They've got some tours on the next day. I'll be around from, again, 25th to the 28th, I think it is, 29th. And then 29th, I arrive in Melbourne. I don't think I've ever flown on a plane in the one country ever, but I'm about to. And I've now renamed Australia as the Big Island, as versus Ireland, which is now the small island. But 29th,
4 hours, that plane ride, I think.
Yeah, it's a long one. I think I'm flying Dublin to Dubai, then Dubai to Brisbane, and then Brisbane to Cairns. And I think I leave on the 23rd and arrive on the 25th. but I think I leave on the 23rd at 10 to 12, and then you lose sort of 9 hours. So don't ask me. You're halfway to a DeLorean motor car here, Joel, at this stage of the game. But anyway, 29th is Melbourne, and then the 30th, I'm speaking at Melbourne University. So there's two parts of that. One is designing gardens for TV, because I am that good looking, and you've seen my cardboard cutout. Another story for another day. So there's two sessions anyway. The serious matters. 29th, Melbourne University, Burnley campus, who very kindly have stepped in and supported the Australian Institute of Horticulture in piecing it all together. 1:30 to 4:30, that's designing gardens for TV and designing gardens for French castles. And then in the evening time, which is the really important one, from 7 to 9, it's designing show gardens with Martin. Martin will be speaking alongside me on that one. But I think for any of the first timers, the student designers, if you are sort of looking to go a next level up TV gardens aren't all that they seem. Let me break this down for you. It's taking almost what you would do at a show garden level. You're making a picture that looks good on television, but it's got to work in reality, which is exactly what a show garden is. So ultimately, it's just a good looking garden that you're proud of. And you learn how to work it to the camera, which is what a show garden ultimately is. Otherwise, it doesn't appear on any website or any newspaper. The French castle ones, I think, are just of intrigue because the difficulty of building in a dried up moat 30 foot below street level, where only bad things happened. And the brief in that one, post a castle falling 3 times into the moat, was to design a garden where people could come and smile. And it is still to this day the most difficult brief I've ever had, and probably the most emotional one I've ever been a part of. That's one. The internal courtyard, you're obviously not supposed to get inside of that. But again, we have to make a garden that didn't look like it was made in pieces of Lego, that could fit through a 18-meter long archway that's a maximum of 1.8 meters wide. And obviously you can't, I think as I originally said to you before, Joel, we were looking at taking 2 cranes, craning one crane from the street onto the roof of the castle. So we could crane everything that was to go into the internal courtyard up onto the roof and then crane it back down again. But defence castles ultimately didn't work in my favour, or they did their intended job and kept that from happening. And then I think when you get into the show garden part of it, and this is where it's probably, if you're first time or second timer, or you're going from achievable to boutique or boutique to show or vice versa, I think when without getting a big head, I apologize, but I think when you've got designer and contractor on stage together, I think that's a Q&A that I would have loved to have been a part of if I went back 20 years. And in that context, I'd recommend going to all of them. I know, but at the same token, if I was a younger student-y designer person and you had to pick one, I'd probably pick the evening one. And I should add, while I have you on the phone, jeez, did you hear me? ARS, who I think their tagline is a cut above. I couldn't find them online. And then David Reed, or what it was, Jason Summers said to me, no, it's Arbor Green. Do you know them?
Oh, yeah. I hadn't heard of ARS, but I've heard of Arbor Green.
So I couldn't find our ARS online, but they do tools for cutting things that photosynthesize ultimately. Let's call it. That covers everything. And then Arbor Green, which is hold on, I do, Rod, Jason, and Mark, fair play to them. So they stepped on board to help the Institute of Horticulture make the talks happen. And you can gather it's not the easiest thing in the world when you're a pretty much volunteer association with a couple of full-time people in there. But even at that, Jason's got his own business. The boys in Arbor Green are absolute gentlemen, in fairness to them. They were due to post me a golf-esque t-shirt with their logo on it. I don't have it on at the moment because I don't have it. The pigeon didn't fly that fast, but yeah, they've backed it. So, but I think in the middle of both of them, they've got sort of breaks and lunches and drinks and nibbles after in the evening time, and there you go. And they've got, if you're a member of any of the associations, they've got discount codes. And if you don't have a discount code, I'll give one to you, Joel. And if anybody wants one, they can just message you and use the discount code off the record.
Yeah, I saw the Landscape Design Institute. They did a post where they showed the prices for members and non-members. But yeah, I couldn't. Yeah, it's not any designer and constructor talking together is going to be valuable. But when you've got yourself and Martin Stemkin, that's next level. So there'll be design students there that will just get their mind blown, just of different ways of thinking about things when Martin talks. So yeah, that'd be an amazing one to sit through.
Yeah, I think, look, Martin and myself, I think I'll go back and say I think there's 2 parts to it, and there. Look, as a guy who was the contractor, we were designing and build company at one point in time. And then obviously when you're doing as much abroad as I am, you can't have a team in Australia and then a team in France. It doesn't work that way. Or as people rightly say to me, we have a life. We have a normal life. We get to go home in the evening time, leave us alone. And I get to do the thing in my head, which is make a garden become a reality or a daydream become reality. But I think when you get a contractor who smiles to you, even though both of you know that this is not going to be an easy ride of a build, but the end result is what makes you smile. Your accountant on both sides is saying you are off your head, you're both moronic, you should be institutionalized. It doesn't make financial sense, but it makes perfect sense when you get to the end of it. It's like literally like going to see the Rolling Stones live, if I may borrow a very bad analogy. You'd query why you'd walk 4 miles home and you know you can't get a taxi home from Slane Castle. But would you swap it for the world? No. The only thing better than that is falling in love there, and then you're halfway into a shampoo advert or some variation of another boutique hotel where there's a lady wearing a I don't know, one of them white clothy dressing robes, handing you a cup of coffee in the morning. And God knows it's been a long time since any woman has ever brought me a cup of coffee in the morning time. So let's park that story to one side and go back to gardens. But yeah, look, Martin's an absolute gentleman. He's an absolute legend. His story of how he set up Semken Inc. Alongside Mark Bentz, rest him, who was very much a part of the garden that we made at Melbourne, very much a part of it, and very much still a part of the family, and certainly not forgotten even to this outsider. And when you realize that the day he set up his company, I'm not, I think I have this right, the day he signed the company into legal being, is that the correct way, the decent way to word it? No. It was the day the stock market crash happened.
Yeah.
And so like when you think it's going well, what I'm saying is he's been through it all. I've been through it all on this end, and I think he's been through it all on that end, or at least he started at the very bottom when it couldn't get any worse. And to see what he's made and what he's built and how he's done it, and so eloquently. But he's also the most medalled contractor in the history of MIFGS. And what an array of gardens he's been a part of, and being a part of in Europe as well, and Chelsea included. So yeah, more than worthwhile.
Mm. So when you were over here doing the garden show, what was like happening with your business, and then what was it like going back and trying to get back in, like started again?
It's a sort of a different way of looking at it. I think when you get into show gardening, your phone goes pretty much on silent. I think you might agree with that, Joel. You don't really have time for shooting the breeze. So I barely got to ring home. Never mind time zones, but I barely got to ring home at all. And I tend not to. Once you get stuck into a project, and it's the same with when we were doing the television shows, I'd be working on 4 hours sleep a night for about, say, 2-3 weeks. So the phone just went off. And funnily enough, I had a guy locally to me here, and he said to me, I tried calling you about 3 years ago. I said, what month was it? Let's say March. He said, March. And I went, yeah, I would have been building the garden for that episode of that TV show. And he said, and you can't answer your phone. And I said, there's 172 volunteers trying to build a 1 acre garden in 8 days whilst they're building a 2-story house at the same time. And he went, oh, is that episode? And I went, yeah. And he went, oh, Jesus, sure. Look, why didn't you say so? It all makes sense. And I saw that one, and, you know, but you just know you get clever. You're there to do a job. People who you work for, you let them know in advance. I'm sort of 20 years, you know, out under my own name now. and a little bit longer, actually 21, I think it is. But at the same token, people have an understanding. They know what you're about to go do. When you go and get married and you're on your honeymoon, and unless you want to punch in the arm, then you're not answering the phone to Peter Donegan saying, "Can I come on the landscaping podcast, Joel?" It just doesn't work that way. People kind of get sort of used to it, and ultimately building a garden at MIFGS, let's get real about it. You just get in there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, as soon as traffic management allows you in, and you leave the minute it gets dark, and they absolutely throw you off site. And if you get one step ahead of the not the rest, because you're only competing against yourself, but if you get one step ahead, the objective, I think, to go full circle on this, is that you want the planting in, which is the last thing you can do, but you need the planting in about 3 days before the show opens, because phototropism, for those who are unaware, plants leaning towards light, but ultimately plants finding their own orientation post coming from a nursery where they're in a straight line. And if you've got plants in a straight line sitting next to each other, it's got now 2 bald sides if it's in the middle, or 4 bald sides, if I may, and you need them to sort of cover the spaces. Otherwise, you get docked points. And it's really easy on judging morning to see in any show garden in my history who was doing their planting late the night before. So by the time the judges come in that morning, the sunlight's just come up, but the plants haven't had enough time to reorientate. And so that's the pressure we were under. I think self-imposed pressure, albeit. So we, I think at one point in time, switched from doing stonework, left it because we'd done the surround of what was the main planted bed, got the planted bed done, and then went back to the stonework, which is the wrong way to do it in a normal garden setting, but the correct way if you want. And again, that's I'm so looking forward to being a part of the Q&A on the evening session, and in fact the 2 daytime ones, but the evening session I think is probably the one that I'm leaning towards here, where Martin's there and myself. Yeah, God, I'd love to have that. I don't know whether it can be recorded, but I hope it is.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. And then they can sell it for people who weren't there,
or just give it away.
But no, they got to make their money from it to fly out here.
Well, look, I know. Private jets are terribly expensive, Joel, and yeah.
And so how are things going now for your business at home?
How are things going for business at home? Look, it's a contrary field that I'm in. It's a contrary sort of an area that I'm in, and I think if you take from 2018, where we did the first garden in the castle in France. I mean, I was there for say 3.5 months. You come 2019, we had done the first RHS medal, a small garden, but for a 180-year-old Gardeners Royal Benevolent Society, and humble to be able to stand by their side and do that for them. You go to 2020, and we're at a point where we've got a Hampton Court Palace Flower Show garden accepted, largest flower show in the world, garden accepted there, sponsored to launch a 180-acre eco park in Manchester. And you've got a second garden for a French castle ready to go. A thing happens in the world. You get 2 phone calls in one day. One is put on hiatus and one is cancelled. The following day, coincidentally, not the following day because we'd started it the year beforehand, 2019, the show gets notification a couple of months later that, lockdown things have, I hate that word, but things have edited slightly in the world gone mad, and we're able to record a TV program safely and securely. And so you end up becoming a part of what is Ireland's most watched television program, and these gardens that ultimately become one part of a show that change somebody's life, do that for 2 years and then step away from it to go back to a second garden at a French castle because we're under contract. The following year, you're in Melbourne, and within the same year, I'm back to Melbourne. And in the middle of it all, never mind anything else, sometimes I do well to just sit down and go, I've been going at a Concorde rate of knots per hour. That's air speed and sea speed more often together, if I may. But you do well to sort of sit down and take stock of what is actually happening. And somehow or another, it just seems to be one project rolling into another. And you'll be aware of this and you'll appreciate it, Joel, when I say to you, you know, if MIFGS rang you on the 1st of March and said, we need a show garden, clippity clop, want it now, you might be able to cobble something together that looked very presentable and you might strike it lucky. But I think in my case, when we started the journey, like it was September, when the first phone calls started happening. And I described it like any show garden, never mind time differences, that's not an issue. But doing a show garden is like having a newborn baby and getting married at the same time. It's just mental, and you either get absorbed into it to ensure that when you arrive on site on day one, that everything is becomes like a Tetris piece. And Semken does exactly what I would have done, and we would have, for gardens that were sort of experimental, we would have built a prototype first, sort of 6 months, a year beforehand, 1.5 years beforehand. And I get to Melbourne and he's got everything labeled and my drawings are printed out and he's got element 1, 2, 3, 17, 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. And the whole thing clicks together like a big, huge jigsaw piece. There's no figuring out on site. There's no cuts on site. And if anybody who's listening to this hasn't seen it, you might post it again. But the video you did of making your steps, how long before you did MIFGS was it that you actually started making them?
I think it was either October or November.
Okay, so we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And your garden was what, 10 by 10?
10 by 13.
10 by 13. So we were 200 square meters, you were 130 square meters. You built a set of steps, and I think you did it over a 3, 4, 6 week period.
It was only a few days, but spread out.
Okay, but over a pace of weeks, once you were doing your other work and paying the bills. You started that in October. I started conversations with IMG and Martin in September. And then you start to get into weekly meetings, and we're doing it remotely. You know, it's Ireland to Melbourne is exactly the way it happened. At my late at night and his early in the morning, or vice versa. And there you go, or my Sunday and his Friday. It didn't really make a difference, and you just get it done. It's not an easy journey, but I'll go back and say it, Joel. You know, so you're only as good as your last garden. And if your last garden, your finest or your worst garden, to put it in context, is your first garden at Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show, in the top 3 flower shows in the world, it's a pretty large stage to be humbled to be a part of. You don't let the organizers down, number one. You don't let yourself down. You don't let the contractor down. Put the work in, get it right, get it done once, and then you can stroll out the door, as I would always say. You get to stroll out the door like you are one of the Bee Gees. And you need to be able to have that swagger. And the only way you can have that swagger is if you've got that confidence. And the only way you can have that confidence, if it's an experimental garden, is if you build it, then strip it apart piece by piece, bring it back in and rebuild it all over again, because you know it's going to click and you know how it's going to look. You know how it's going to work, and you know piece by piece. And that's exactly what we did. So it takes time. When you get into the talks like this on the subjects that we're talking on, like I'll go back and say it, you know, if we take Arbor Green and ARS, and you take the Australian Institute of Horticulture, and you're asked to stand on stage and speak about the benefits of show gardens to the hort industry. You know, if I say something that's sort of slightly incorrect and you're in the audience, all you need is one heckle to throw you off your kilter, if I may. But you just don't get it wrong, and stuff like that, I guess, takes a little bit of time. We've got private stuff on in between to go full circle on your question. We've got some consultancy stuff that we're working on where it's designs that were done incorrect. Let me politely say that. And the cost of maintaining the garden, because a cheaper option or a more cost-effective option at the time, understandably, was taken. I get why, but it's only when it sometimes goes wrong that you realise. And it's a conversation I had, Joel, with a friend of mine, and I was saying to him, I used to be head over grounds in a college in Dublin when I was about 22. Terrible money, but a beautiful title. And I couldn't have more money for plants, so you couldn't do up the grounds. But then they had a contractor in place who was taking the budget, so you couldn't touch the budgets, but you couldn't get more money, but you couldn't anything. So the place just stagnated. So I took all of the machinery that wasn't used, met with one of the suppliers, and I said, if I give you all of this machinery that we're not using anymore, will you give me a mulching mower ride-on? And he went, yes. And we edited the beds to whatever the ride-on mower didn't take. To the right-hand side of it, we moved the plants slightly forward, so the beds all looked full. We cut the grass cutting man-hour units from 143 to 13 and a half. Let the contractor go because we didn't need him anymore to cut grass. And we put the money into plants, and Peter Donegan became a genius overnight. And the biggest reason for doing that or being able to achieve that, it's not rocket science. The lads used to use the push mower. They'd empty the grass box onto a trailer. If you're emptying a grass box, you're not cutting grass. And then they drive off with the trailer to dump the grass by hand into a heap, which then cost money on skips. So we eliminated the cost of the skips sitting there for 3 months until they filled, and so on. And then ride-on lawnmower mulching only changed absolutely everything. And that was it. Within a year, I was gone. And I think in this, how did I get onto that subject?
I don't know. I was just thinking the same thing.
I just deviated for no apparent reason. I'd have to play this back, listen to myself, and go, that's where I was going with this. But yeah, anyway, there you go. I'll segue back on. Ask me a different question, I suppose.
Yeah, I can't remember where you're going with that, but one of the exciting things when you're coming out to Melbourne is that we're going to be having a catch up at PJ O'Brien's. So that's something I'm looking forward to anyway.
Is that where we're going?
I think so, yeah. I think it'd be the most appropriate place for an Irishman who comes to Australia to go to an Irish pub.
That's kind of stereotyping, Joel. I'll be honest with you. You know,
exactly.
No, look. All jokes aside, I was in PJ O'Brien's with the entire Semkin family and extended the day before I went home. Yeah, the day I went home, my apologies. I literally left there. They went to see David O'Doherty, I think it was, the comedian, who's far funnier than I am, and you combined, I should add. And I literally got into a taxi and went to the airport, which was interesting, but none to the point. I don't know why it was a friend of mine, Liam, said to me, look, would you stop by PJ O'Brien's and just get me a photograph? Nostalgic reasons, and we'll park that one there. But I don't know how far away everything is from each other. But if PJ O'Brien's is where it is, then that's all good. And I believe you're in good or bad, delete as appropriate company with the intended session that might happen after.
Yeah. So at the moment, I know that Daniel Althouse is coming, and there's an up and comer called Ashley James who's going to be coming along as well.
Oh, I heard about him. He was on another podcast of recent.
I haven't heard. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, apparently he was talking about how good he looks in photograph whilst he's doing some gardening in his wax leather jacket. But yeah,
is that the one where he referred to himself as Instagram famous?
Is he Instagram famous?
Apparently, yeah.
highly intelligent, good looks. He's got everything going for him, really.
Yeah. No MIFGS garden though. So maybe he can get involved in the achievables.
Don't be hard on him. No. In fairness to AJ, he's a good man, and it's always a pleasure to hear from him. And I met AJ in MIFGS, and I think he'd come in with about 3 or 4 days to go to help on one or two of the gardens. And I think when you see that, it's a real, all jokes aside, it's a real testament to the guy. It's a real testament to the industry, full stop, that people tend to do that. And I was listening to your last episode, your Q&A one, and I think you had said that you're not doing a garden under your own name this year at MIFGS, but you would be coming in to help out. And I think at one point in time, and I'm for those who haven't heard of it, I think you said if you have to carry a bucket around and hand out magazines, you'll do it. And when you get that, the ego is kind of gone out the door. It's the kind of fella you'd want to go and have a nice pint of Guinness with in a pub, to be fair to you. And that's two of you. And I'll go back and say what I said before. You're offered a seat in a rocket ship. Don't ask what seat, just get on. But I think in show garden bills, you very fast learn who you actually want to wake up in bed beside. If pardon my turn of phrase, but I don't mean it like that. That's a far cry from the teabag thing you were talking about on your previous episode, Joel. And we'll park that one there as well. But it's you learn who is going to be in there at 5 o'clock in the morning with you, and who's going to stay with you even though it's raining and you forgot your raincoat, and the sandwiches are a bit wet, and your shoes are wet, your socks are wet, and you get to have a pint with the guy who did that with you. Then I think it's a pretty good day. And one of the notes I made to you genuinely was, you get not so caught up, but you're rightly and logically consumed into this build that takes 2 weeks and 6 months before that of your time. You're on the cusp of seeing all of that hard work become real. And I'll reference your steps again in how pedantic you were about them, but rightly so. And at no point in time, I think when we did the industry drinks night thing, I think I had a bottle and a half of beer, and I was gone. I was falling asleep. But the next day is the media stroll in the door, and they'll either go, well, you look tired, or leaning towards, we can't have him on camera because he looks so tired, but you should look tired. But I think I was saying to you, there are excellent, superb people in there, a litany and an elongated list who I'm very thankful to. And we've never had as such a point together where you're not thinking, tomorrow morning I have to be up at 5 o'clock to get the show garden finished. So you can't have one more, or you can't have more than two. And it's just sometimes nice to just take off an hour of the next morning and go, I'll go for a pint with Joel and AJ and Daniel. And to go back on that one, I know Daniel had said to me, we were talking prior to my arrival at MIFGS. He'd contacted me after he heard me on your show, I think. And he was saying, when you get here, let me know and we'll go for a beer. And I'm going in my head, that is not going to happen. I know I'm in Melbourne. I know the sun might be shining, and I wasn't on a jamboree or a holiday. It was, you're polite to people and you're very eloquent and you're mannerly as you are reared. But ultimately, you've got a job to do. And if you don't do that job, you let people down. So get the job done and party afterwards, if you will. But unfortunately, I just don't think there's enough time when you're in the middle of that. And I think you'll agree with that. We've probably spoke twice. We were a 3-minute walk away from each other. We spoke twice, I think, 3 times maybe.
Yeah, and probably 7 words.
Yeah, in the space of 2 weeks. Yeah. So it is what it is. But it'd be a good night, and fingers crossed. And I think there's some nibbles and drinks after anyway at the at Melbourne Uni Burnley campus anyway. So yeah, head to the AIH website if you want to be part of the cool gang and hang around with people like AJ. Is that a good? Do they call that a unique selling point, Joel?
Well, it's definitely unique.
Okay, well, if you want to be, I don't know. We really should have rehearsed this beforehand. I'll segue off this. I meant to say big thanks to David Reid and the NGIV. I know they have a gig, a trade day. I think it's the next morning. I think it is. But I know Carl at Botanics and Warner's Nursery. Botanics, aren't they sponsors of the other podcast?
They were. I think they might have changed.
Oh, well, they weren't on the last episode.
Yeah, I think it's MRL Media now.
Okay, well, but yeah, I think Botanics, Carl from Botanics will be there, and Warner's Nurseries, who are absolute legends, Ian and team, and Michael, they'll all be there. So I'll probably be at that the next day as well. But I think just Dave Reid, I think, has been a big part of working with Jason Summers to make this all happen. So well done to the NGIV. I think they're particularly good at backing things in the industry. Aren't they responsible for the Achievable Gardens in MIFGS?
Yeah, they sponsor it every year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so there you go. Nice tight-knit family. It'll be good to see them all again. And yeah, but if you're looking for tickets, go to Google Peter Donegan, best looking Irishman in brackets.
Not the singer.
Finest garden. Not singer. No. No, it wasn't that the thing, wasn't Lonnie? Is it Lonnie Donegan's brother or Lonnie Donegan's son?
Yeah.
Is Peter Donegan, and he's a country western singer. So now and again I get tagged on Instagram as great gig, and I just thanks Peter, and I go, yeah, no problem, and then they delete their comments, and it just looks a bit weird then, me speaking to nobody. But yeah, go to the AIH, Australian Institute of Horticulture, or Google Peter Donegan something, and it'll come up. Get the tickets, and if you need a discount code, give Joel a call. And
well, I'll put links in the show notes of this episode, so they can click on that and go straight there.
Yeah, you have to. I think for the discount codes, you're supposed to be, or you have to be a member of the Landscape Design Institute, or one of the associations, or the Association, the Institute of Horticulture.
Yep.
So, and again, I think in fairness to the Landscape Design Institute, they've been pretty good at promoting the fact that the gig is on. So it'll be a good mix, and I think everybody seems to be saying. I've never obviously done outside of MIFGS, I've never done a speaking thing to industry or public, and so I'm assuming it's going to be a mix of the two, but that's always a good thing. It was actually Coralie, a girl called Coralie on Instagram. I think she said to me, I know I met her at MIFGS. She was working on one of the gardens, and her second name slipped my mind. And I think she was saying she's going to bring mom and dad, and I went, hey, session with mom and dad after in PJ O'Brien's. That'll be rock and roll. I like that. That's okay. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, no, it sounds like an awesome place to be. So I couldn't recommend it highly enough, and may even get there myself to have a listen to, because there'll be a lot to learn from both yourself and Martin, as well as yourself talking about on the other two talks you're doing. So I reckon it'll be awesome, and it'll be good to see you out here again anyway.
Yeah, look, I'll say it, Joel, show gardens are an absolute roller coaster of a journey. Starting in September, finishing in March, you feel like you could sleep for a month, and in reality, you've got to get back to normal work and try and pay normal bills. And sometimes in life, without sounding all nostalgic and poetic, I think it's important to just kick off the shoes and go for a pint and say yes to the gig, and just go to the damn thing. and have a good time and learn something new, but at least your clothes aren't going to be covered in mud. And if you remember the rain in MIFGS, I think it was about 3-4 days before finishing, and they were trying to do the pointing on the Bamstone garden, which therefore contains the serious amount of stone. They were trying to do all the pointing on it, and we were sitting underneath a small 2 meter by 2 meter canopy, for which the hydrostatic head rating on it, I'd say, was probably about a Wendy house rating. No disrespect to anybody, and all I could think was, this is the worst Irish holiday I've ever been on, and I'm 6 years of age, and it was bad flashbacks. But you come out of that, and again, I'll say it, your clothes are dry. It's funny, the show opens, sun starts shining, and nobody remembers the things that sort of didn't go according to plan that you managed to fix. And I think you have to take a step back and go, look, there's a decent excuse to get out. Let's put on some clean clothes that will remain clean for an evening, and let's have a fruit-based drink or a black thing with a white thing at the top that fits into a large glass. And you can do Peter Griffin Family Guy impressions if you want to, and it'll be good to see everybody again genuinely. And again, I'll say it was a roller coaster doing MIFGS that I wouldn't swap for the world, but I think it'd be nice to see people just in person and go, how are you? I'm good. That's great to hear. And you actually want to give them a hug because you can, because you're not going to dirty their clothes. And that changes absolutely everything. Yeah. So yeah, and good to see you again. Good to see you then.
Yes. Yeah, but I can't wait. Looking forward to seeing you, and thank you very much for coming on again.
You're most welcome, Joel. Pleasure as always.